right, so here we are with lesson 4B, finding slope using similar triangles. Students will be able to find the slope or unit rate in different situations. Students will be able to explain how to find the unit rate given a table, graph, or equation. And this is important for solving real-world problems like finding how quickly the amount of water in a reservoir is changing. All right, so let's look at this word slope. So slope is also the same thing as the rate. So we've already been talking about rate and unit rate. And so rate is the same thing as slope. It's just referred to as slope, thinking of a mountainside if the slope is going up or the slope is going down. And so if you hear the word slope, it is the same thing as rate. It just gets this, this letter M is usually the word or the letter that they identify as slope. And I think that's M like for mountain. So slope is rate, which is the vertical change over the horizontal change. In other words, that is the change in Y over the change in X. So it's what we've been doing. It is the same thing as rate of change. It's just also referred to as slope. So on this graph in particular, if we find some good points, so notice there are some good points already here for us, some good cross points. And to move from point to point, we're looking at the change. So we're looking at the vertical change over the horizontal change. So in this particular graph, the vertical change, the change in the Y, is 2. So the change in the Y, the vertical change is 2. Hopefully you can see that there. So we count up 1, 2. And then the horizontal change, the change in the X, just has to go over 1. And so here we see that the slope is just 2 over 1, which is equal to 2. Now in the equation, we see that slope show up. Slope shows up right there where the rate does in front of the X, because that's how the points are changing. They're changing 2 Y's per every X, 2 Y's per every X. And we can see that show up here as well. So if we're looking at the vertical change between these 2 points, it goes up more. So how does that work? So it goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, goes up 4. So the change in Y would be 4 over the change in X for that one has a change of 2. So that goes over 2, but 4 over 2 is an equivalent fraction. 4 over 2 just equals 2. So again, we see the slope show up in front of the X because that's the rate. Now this other new word today, y-intercept, is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So a y-intercept, if you play football, it's like interception, intercepting the line, catching the line. It's where the y-axis catches the line. So I'm going to circle that point. That should sound familiar. It's the starting point, otherwise known as initial value. Initial value. And so sometimes that is also referred to as B, is the letter that they refer to that, B for beginning. And so our initial value is also known as a y-intercept point, and that is where X is 0. So remember, that's our initial value, that's our starting point. So that's our value when X is 0. So on this equation in particular, we see X equals 0 when Y equals -3. And so we would write that the y-intercept here is 0, -3. And we see that show up in the equation right at the side here. There's our -3. That is our initial value. And so another way to see this is Y equals mx plus b. So Y equals the rate times the X plus the initial value. All right, but let's start by just looking at slope. So let's look at number 1. Find the slope of this line. So this is where you guys were having a little bit of a hard time last couple lessons. So we want to find some good corner points. So to find some good points, we want to look for where this line crosses at the corner of 2 boxes. So like that would be a good point to look at. Over here, that y-intercept point isn't so easy, but this one right here crosses at a cross point, so that would be our next good point. Remember, our slope is the vertical change over the horizontal change, so change in Y over change in X. So the change in the Y, the vertical change, to get from this point to this point, the first thing we have to do is go up. And how many points do we go up? Well, we go up 1. And you can write in a little +1 there if you want to. We would have to go up 1 point to be level with the next point. So the change in y is 1. Now let's look at the vertical change. From there, we have to go right 1, 2, 3 points. So the horizontal change is 3. And so that tells me the slope of this line is 1/3, the change in y over the change in x. Now, if we wanted to see another point there, we could find another point, and we would see that it would come out equal again. So this line is continuously going up 1 and over 3 to get to the next point. All right, so the slope of that one is 1/3. Let's check another line. Let's look on the back here. Number 2, there's another good line. And we just want to look for some good cross points first. So let's follow the line. That one looks like a good point. And then we keep going. Nope, not so much. This one looks pretty good. Nope, not so much, not so much, not so much. Oh, there's another good one. And we just have to look at what it takes to get to the next dot. Remember, for slope, we're always looking at the vertical change over the horizontal change. The vertical change is the change in y. The horizontal change is the change in x. So let's look at that. Pick any of these points. So I'll pick the one down here. Let's look and see how much we have to change vertically to get to the next point. This one I have to go up. So that's up 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to write in a little +3 there. And that tells me the vertical change, the change in y, means I have to go up 3. And then the horizontal change from there over 1, 2. So we had to go right 2. And so the horizontal change is 2. So that tells me the slope of this line is 3/2. Or in other words, the unit rate. Same thing. Let's check between the next 2 points. Up 1, 2, 3. That's the same. Right 1, 2. Same thing. All right, so our slope for that line is 3/2. Number 3, let's do that again, but this time it looks a little bit smaller. I'll zoom in so that you can see it a little bit better. We need to find 2 good points. So it looks like this time we do have a good starting point. Looks like our next one might be there. Next one's there. You can literally just look for anywhere it crosses at a corner in the grid. And now we want to look at the change to get to the next point. So for slope, remember it's change in y over the change in the x. All right, so this one is changing vertically, going up 1, 2, 3. Changing vertically by going up 3. Changing horizontally by going right 1. And so that tells me the slope is 3/1, which is equal to just 3. All right, it does say to find this using 3 similar triangles. What that's getting you to see is no matter what point I go to, I will get an equivalent fraction. So instead of going up 1, 2, 3/1, I could go up 6/2. Or I could go up 9/3. Either way, I get an equivalent answer. So my slope is still going to be 3 no matter which points I pick. Okay, now on to number 4. Number 4 asks for the slope and the y-intercept. All right, so but still, we start by finding good points. Always start by finding good points. So that looks like a good point. That looks like a good point. There's another one. And it doesn't really matter how many you pick. As long as you have at least 2 or 3, it makes it easy to see. So let's start with the slope. The slope is the change in the y over the change in the x. All right, so the vertical change this time, I'm going to start here. My vertical change this time is going down. So this goes down 1, 2. To show going down 2, I put a -2. This is going down 2, and then the horizontal change is just 1. All right, so this slope is negative. That tells me the slope is -2, and we can tell because this is a downward slope. If we were on a ski, we would go down the hill. So slope this time is -2. And now we have to find the y-intercept. So remember the y-intercept is our initial value. That's where the x equals 0. In other words, it's where it hits the y-axis. All right, so if we follow the y-axis, we see that this line is going to hit right there at +1. All right, so I'm going to label that as B. b equals positive 1. So we can either write it as just 1, or we can say that is a point, and it's the point 0, 1. Same thing. All right, let's try that one again, and here's our last example. Number 5, find the slope and the y-intercept. So remember, the slope is the vertical change over the horizontal change. And we have to find some good points. So let's find some good points. Looks like there's one there. Looks like there's another one there. So there's not a whole lot of good points on this one. So I only count about 3 good points. Remember, for good points, that means it's crossing right at the corner, crossing right at whole numbers for both the x and the y. All right, so now let's count the changes. So vertical change from here, it looks like it has to go down. So it's going down 1, 2, 3, 4. Going down 1, 2, 3, 4. Down 4 means I'm going to write negative 4. And then my horizontal change from there, I have to go to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have to go to the right 6. Okay, so that's a fraction that I can reduce. So that tells me, oh, there was another good point in there. There was one right there that I didn't see originally, but that's okay. Because if you find 2 good points, you can write down their changes and then reduce. I can reduce negative 4, 6 by 2 to get negative 2 over 3. So that tells me the slope of this line is negative 2 over 3. And let's check that. That means I should be able to go down 2, right 3, and hit a point. Let's check. Down 2, right 3. 1, 2, 3. And I do hit another good point. There is another one there. All right, now it's asking for the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is where it hits the y-axis. And so it's hitting the y-axis right there on my graph at negative 4. And so I would write that b, the y-intercept, is negative 4. In other words, it's hitting at the point 0, negative 4. All right, so that is it for today's lesson, just identifying slope and y-intercept. Make sure that you have color-coded things if possible, and always ask if you have a question about where I got these numbers during the notes so that I can tell you, okay? All right, don't forget to do your exit ticket, and I'll talk to you soon.